Fans love it for the skill, the strength of the athletes, and perhaps even the violence. And we're not talking small numbers here. While the sport is perhaps best experienced live, the vast majority of viewers are online, and it seems like that's where the money is as well. In this episode, we look at the business of MMA and find out more about MMA's presence and growth in Asia, and whether they're rolling with the punches that COVID has been dishing out. To understand the explosion of interest, I met with Shumei Lam, co-founder of an MMA gym that also produces fighters for competitions.
Probably have about 200 active members at the moment. And it's not uncommon for gyms our size or studios our size to have about 300 to 400 active members. And I would say that there are about 10 active mixed martial arts gyms in Singapore. It's not uncommon to have a class just with 100% females, because accidental side effect of practicing martial arts is weight loss. I think with women, we get a lot of members who came from your traditional kind of gyms where you would go for a workout on the equipment or you do classes. But I guess the biggest feedback is that they were bored. So in Singapore, I guess there are more amateur fight promotions than there are professional fight promotions. But I would say that in terms of the Muay Thai scene, we don't have many opportunities for professional fighters unless obviously you join one championship. This, it does provide a platform for fighters to get some experience before they, for example, decide to go to Thailand and fight on the professional scale and scene there. Likewise for BJJ, we do have, a couple of local competitions, and these also provide, a springboard for aspiring BJJ practitioners to join like the World Championships if they want to travel overseas to compete as well.
The top MMA promotion companies, like American-based Ultimate Fighting Championship, are valued at over $7 billion, and the Asian market has plenty of potential for similar growth. I sat down with two major promotion companies here, Rebel FC and One Championship, to walk me through how MMA got to this scale.
MMA has actually been the fastest growing sport for a long time. For the past 10 years, it's actually the fastest growing sport in the US. I stumbled upon the MMA. So when I first saw it, I saw a sold out stadium in Las Vegas. It was a UFC fight. And then I saw the guys walk out like gladiators. And then when they started the fight in this octagon, it kind of blew me away because it was so fresh.
How did it get to grow so big without that kind of mainstream exposure in the beginning?
Actually, martial arts is pretty mainstream, especially in our home region of Asia. Every single Asian country has a martial art, be it karate and judo from Japan, wushu from China, kickboxing or Muay Thai from Thailand, and even India. Before we came along, and obviously before the UFC came along, 30 plus years ago, no one had really organized it. Now, obviously, they organize and commercialize it in the US, and the US in general has been, the mecca for sports commercialization. But no one in Asia had come up to kind of unite, 4.4 billion people around what is really a long-standing sport, right, in this region. And we've done that. Today we're broadcast, in 150 plus countries to a potential reach of 2.6 billion people. So it's been there for ages. Martial arts today, especially as presented in the West, has a certain taint of blood sport, right, and violence, right, and controversy. That's not what martial arts is about. Martial arts is about values, it's about history, it's about culture. Martial arts is Asia's greatest cultural treasure and cultural export to the world. Asia has 4.4 billion people, right? The US has 330 million people, and they produce 4 or 5 multi-billion-dollar sports leagues. And at the top of the table, you have the NFL, that's worth about $90+ billion. And why is Asia, right, with 4.4 billion people, even single countries like China, right, or India with over 1 billion apiece, why can't Asia produce something of at least half its size, right? So that's the business opportunity, right? Asia has produced a couple of significant sports media properties, but we really are the first to have a sport and have a league that is relevant all across Asia, and it's also broadcast across the world.
And the sport wouldn't be worth mentioning without its stars. Most of them bred from early on to become charismatic characters with well-known histories and even feuds with other fighters. So how do you go about deciding, what makes a great MMA fighter?
We were talking about becoming the Marvel of MMA, whereby we were taking the fighters, we looked at them as characters. So we had our Iron Man and our Thor, and then we had entertainment showpieces like our reality show, which would be like the Avengers, where all the fighters come together for a reality show. It really resonated with the fans because you saw different aspects of the fighters. So we take a lot of what the person is naturally, and then we exaggerate that, and we kind of bring out the best of that with our press conferences and our events. And then it's our job to kind of film that and to kind of create the content that shows really all that rich background of these fighters, where they came from and where they're fighting.
We want to find heroes in all these different countries, Asian and non-Asian, and put them on a global stage. And I think because of the state of sports commercialization in Asia, unfortunately, much fewer Asian athletes have been given that stage, right? And then you think about the business opportunity. If you look around the world, all the major sports leagues of the world are Western in origin. All the major global sports leagues. Yeah, I'd say first of all, our formula for entertainment is relatively simple. As I said, nothing to do with staging the biggest, bloodiest, or best fights, right? It has to do with values, heroes. Ultimately, people want to connect with their favorite athletes, their favorite teams. They want to know where they came from, the challenges they overcame. So when you think about the entire business and engine that we're building, it really goes beyond just having, live fight events.
How do you ensure that the fights are still good fights? Because fans are gonna turn away if it looks too staged or too much like wrestling, the World Wrestling Federation in the US, right? Guys breaking chairs. That's not too fake. What's the right alchemy between the production value and still having a really good fight with two talented fighters?
Yeah, that's a very good. I think you have to still go all in with the marketing and the promotion. I mean, you don't really know the line until you kind of crossed it. But obviously, we want to be respectful of boundaries and of nationality. But it's the fight business at the end of the day as well. I mean, they're gonna go inside and literally beat the living, out of each other. So and it's very competitive. There's a lot at stake. So actually, build up is actually that suspense of them not knowing what the outcome is. So you got to look at the sport like it's theatre. So we're all like actors in a Shakespearean play, and then you got guys who are serious. You got guys like Don King who are very flamboyant, talking about the American dream and only in America, and has fantastic catchphrases. And then you got other guys who are maybe a bit more subdued, a bit more serious, like a lot of the Japanese promoters who are very serious and honorable. So I think you have to have a lot of different mixes.
By definition, MMA covers a broad spectrum of martial arts. But is there space for other forms of fighting championships in the fight for global eyeballs? I spoke with Gerald Ong from the World Lethwei Championship, which has an audience in 60 countries, to understand how this edgy, violent, and ancient cousin of Muay Thai has become so wildly popular.
I think it's also the truest art form in combat sports, in the whole martial art spectrum. Lethwei has a way of proving who the best competitor is.
Now, there's this image of Lethwei as being more violent than other MMA sports. Tell us a bit about the history of the sport and how we got to this point with its popularity.
I think part of it is the mystique as well, with how Myanmar is such a closed-off society. There's this allure of this little-known sport that's really popular among the hardcore fight fans. Lethwei is striking art and you can use punches, elbows, knees, and also headbutts. And there has a huge cultural significance of Lethwei in the Burmese community. It's been around for close to 1,000 years. And we're glad that finally now more and more people are finding out and noticing it. We have about 150 athletes from Myanmar and about 150 athletes from the rest of the world.
And I think when it started, it was really an underground sport.
A lot of these organizers in the past were just organizing one-off events and making money from ticket sales. There was no long-term vision or strategy, global broadcast distribution, and those are stuff that has never been done for the sport of Lethwei in the past. Almost all the major sports have been tried and tested on the broadcast market. Yeah, how often do you get the chance to take on a new sport and bring it on the global platform and actually have a chance of letting it break into the mainstream?
So the way that the sport is practiced today, is there a difference between the modern form of lightweight compared to what it was, decades or centuries past even in Myanmar?
We have introduced a judging system, and we have also removed some of the rules to make it safer and more entertaining for the global audience. One of the rules in particular that a lot of people associate lightweight with is this timeout rule, where if a fighter gets knocked down, the cornerman can call a timeout, wake the fighter up and continue competing. And of course, that is not ideal for the health and safety of the athlete. And all of this was done in the hopes of introducing the sport to a broader audience.
Do you think we're seeing a trend toward kind of more bare knuckle types of fighting? We've seen the evolution of MMA and Muay Thai and other types of hardcore, you might call it, fight sports. Is lightweight kind of in that trend, you think? And maybe it's the purest form of that in a way?
I think it's a mix of people wanting a different form of entertainment, and also there's a growing sense of disillusionment among the community of mixed martial arts, what the traditional combat sports have evolved into, which is more of a point scoring system rather than a combat sport, rather than a fight.
Most people would know this to be staged. Well, maybe not your 5-year-old nephew. But the global appetite for professional wrestling is still massive, and the biggest player, WWE, is valued at over $5 billion. Here in Asia, we've got Singapore Pro Wrestling, and I spoke with Andre to find out where the sport fits in with the other promotion companies.
It's like, I would call extreme theater, where you have these actors who are performing all these crazy stunts that are very hard to pull off. People just want to come and be amazed, and that's why I also call it like it's honest theater, where in other arts performances you can't exactly say your mind on the spot, but in wrestling, it's the beauty of it. Just people just come and they shout whatever they want, and we kind of carved our own niche in Singapore. If you come and see one of our shows, it's just complete chaos, but everyone goes home feeling completely satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a great piece of entertainment.
While you see many wrestling promotions around the world try and pay huge stars to come in and wrestle for them and market it in that way using the foreign talent, we tried to do it very organically with SPW. So we used very colloquial ideas, very organic Asian gimmicks. We've had all sorts of like local doctor gimmicks, local butcher, we've got local heroes, themed on even Singlish comes into play, Asian languages come into play during our shows. And that's how we wanted to build it. I'm very proud because all of my performing wrestlers came from nothing and now they are celebrated by the local community.
Are they performers? And how do they get trained to kind of play these roles?
Most of them were not athletes when they came to us, but they just found their niche, and their passion for wrestling actually inspired them to work on their personal cardio, their personal fitness, their agility, little things like that. And this is where they are now. They're not A-list celebrities, but they're celebrated by many Singaporeans.
Yeah, there's that kind of campy element to it, and everyone kind of knows the fights are scripted, but at the same time, there is a great amount of excitement, and people do go home entertained.
I realized that pretty early on while promoting these events, that it's really important to endear the audience to each fighter. Perhaps that's what martial arts and mixed martial arts could take from pro wrestling sometimes, that you really need to endear your fans to the fighters. They need to have a reason to support the fighter, whether they identify with that person's beliefs, that person's background, that person's style of fighting.
But as these players plan a global expansion, it seems that everyone is looking to China first. The Chinese are planning an $800 billion sport industry by 2025, and about 15% of the massive Chinese market are already MMA fans. So obviously China's the huge prize. The regional market too in Southeast Asia is pretty big, a lot of interest in MMA here. What's the size of the Southeast Asia, ASEAN market? Singapore, but also looking around other countries.
Yeah, I mean, a good comparative would be our friendly competitor, our brother in the Business One Championship. They got invested by Temasek. They're supposed to be valued now at almost $1 billion. So I think Temasek are very smart guys, and Their viewership numbers are huge. I think they're talking about 50 million, no, they got about 12 million Facebook fans in Asia. So I think that's around the number, about 20 to 50 million. And Indonesia is huge as well.
Tell me a bit about the China market. Is that where you see the most lucrative opportunity for you guys?
Absolutely. I think it's the final frontier. I think it's the last place. I believe wholeheartedly because of the talent that is there.
What's the size of the market there for MMA, you think? And given all the attention on China, is there a spot for Rebel FC, say, if you're the number 2 player in that market?
I think, it's quite unknown as in statistically how big the market is. It's just going from our experiences in China with our events and the kind of the audiences that we've been reaching. Each event we put on, we get 30 million views on digital, about 5 million TV viewership. I think the audience in China is huge. It's about 300 million martial arts fans. There's 25 million combat sports fans, which is even a lot more than the US.
I want to ask you about China because I know you spent a lot of time there recently, and clearly this is like the future of the sport and the present.
Yeah.
I'm struck that you've got Chinese companies now looking to expand beyond China.
So look, I think China, I like where we are today. We have made a heavy investment in China, and we will continue to double down in this country. We've been in China now 3 or 4 years. We started out having local events. We're on Beijing TV, Great Sports, which is part of the Shanghai Media Group, Shanghai Satellite, we're on Shandong TV, Guangdong TV. So we have multiple TV distribution partners, and we also have digital streaming partners like Tencent. I'm just excited, right, at the opportunity that China presents, not just in China, but outside of China as well, as Chinese companies continue to expand in other countries.
The expansion of the sport means that companies need more fighters to promote, while also keeping standards high. While life is definitely sweet at the top of the rankings, what is life like for the thousands of other fighters who are literally fighting their way to the top?
Why do gyms produce fighters? Well, obviously, again, not every gym is a fighting gym. So in general, gyms have fighters because it also does give good publicity to the gym, Whenever there are fight promotions, people are always looking out for, which gym do they come from? I've never heard of them. But it does help to propel you quite quickly into to get some credibility as a martial arts gym.
And the local events that are here in Singapore, what are the earnings like? I mean, can you make a living out of it, or is it more of a hobby?
Yeah, amateur fights have no prize money at all. Even the professional fights, it's not, it'll be a token sum, if anything. Definitely, if you want to make martial arts as a career, just as a fighter, it's very difficult. It's not sustainable. More often than not, you find fighters like Radim, for example, who also double up as coaches, and that's their key source of income.
So you represent NewFit at one championship events. Why do you choose to fight in one championship, and what does that mean to you?
When we look at the Asia market, right, one championship is actually the biggest organization in Asia. And of course there's a lot of top athletes there, so I just want to go in to compete, to test myself against the best. I want to see how much I've improved, and that's why I prefer to compete there. There's a lot of athletes from different countries, so it's kind of tough, but I like it.
And obviously when you're competing in a sport like this, there's a limited amount of years you have where you can really compete at a high level. So how do you thought about your career? I mean, how do you decide, okay, I'm going to devote myself in this period of my life to really being, great at this and really pushing myself in this? And how do you think about what comes after that?
You see, when we talk about athletes, right, that compete in combat sports, most of them, when you ask them about this, they always say, I will keep fighting until my body give up, and then I will be just a trainer. They never think in a long term about, you need to plan about your future, All they know is that, I be a trainer, that's it, done. Good role model that I actually look at is two-person, Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor, because this is what I feel that a lot of athletes should educate themselves to think about their future. The minute 2-3 years before, once they start competing, they start to have that money, they need to make investment.
The sudden postponement of live events because of the pandemic was a major blow to MMA, which relies heavily on broadcasting these grand shows. Will going purely online feel the same and also be as profitable?
Because right now, a lot of events are suspended. So people are actually desperate to see an event. You get what I mean? And so for us, especially in Asia, when in Singapore suddenly there's an event, like a fight event, man, a lot of people are going to watch it.
Yeah, and obviously WWE being kind of a precursor for SPW, it's a sport that has gone worldwide mainly from television and less so from the live experience. Has that been the same case with SPW, that you've got a live audience, but you're also catering to a big audience watching online at home?
Pre-COVID and during COVID, pro wrestling is very much involves the audience. The audience is very much the third man in the match. If you watch, let's say, UFC now, which does not have audiences, sure, a blood sport fight can go on without the audience, but the reaction and the wrestlers then reacting to those reactions is the backbone of our entire product. As SPW, we have been churning out more online content, but not too much, and we don't want to totally become a digital business because fans are already getting very tired looking at the computer screen. I know that our target market really wants to come out and have a good time. So let's save up and get ready to put on a good show for that time when it comes instead.
And how does the pandemic play into staging an event, so that obviously you've got to have a crowd to get the product that you put on be as exciting as possible?
Ultimately, this is about broadcast and streaming, and as long as we can have a live event, that broadcast and streaming asset can continue to live. We have a whole library of content and a whole assortment of athletes that continue, right, to create output. We've cut up old fights, best of series, magazine shows, highlight reels, and we've been serving this up to, in fact, our broadcasters in many countries, they want more and more. Why? Because people are at home more. They're at home looking at a screen like you and I are right now, or some sort of mobile device, right?
In fact, the majority of your audience is online. Going into the future, do you think that that's going to be a benefit for Lei Wei, because you'll have an audience that's going to be consuming these fights even though there may not be as big of crowds allowed inside the stadiums?
Yeah, I like to think of what World Lei Wei Championship is doing as being a media entity. We are competing with all other entertainment properties for eyeballs. Because Lei Wei has never been this accessible in the past, right now we are tapping into the benefits of the internet revolution and how it helps us to reach audiences far and wide, and that's definitely a benefit, especially during this time. Combat sports has already have a 60 billion market share of the entire sports entertainment landscape, and with the growing audience and the growing scale of the industry, there's always going to be people who want alternative forms of entertainment and alternative forms of combat sports.
I think the sports industry has been, not say stagnant, but it's been developed for so long, for the past 20 years. They were dependent a lot on TV broadcasters, but as we all know, TV has kind of been downtrending in terms of revenue and in terms of viewership. Uptrending now is online digital media. So I think the space in China, at least, or even worldwide, has been taking quite a disruption in terms of how audiences are consuming sports.
So MMA is now worth billions, and everyone's talking about growing market share, audience share. And what about you? Do you see the future of pro wrestling, of mixed martial arts, as sustainable?
It is sort of sustainable, but prize fighters, they have a much shorter shelf life. But somehow the martial arts industry has always been able to sustain with fighters with short careers and always being replaced by new blood.